In his book, The Ghost Studies, New Perspectives on the Origins of Paranormal Experiences, Brandon Massullo shares a fascinating account that challenges the notion of what exactly constitutes a ghost. The story begins with John home alone, while his wife Emily was enjoying a girls' night out. Emily had sent John a text indicating that she would be home within about 20 minutes, but as time passed with no word from Emily, John began to worry. It had been an hour and a half, and John tried to calm his nerves by occupying himself surfing the internet. Suddenly, he felt a presence in the room that put his nerves on edge. He then noticed something out of his peripheral vision behind him and to his right. John commanded his fear just enough to turn and see who or what was behind him. When he turned, he saw a cloudy and transparent image of his wife, Emily. She was dressed in the same clothing she had worn when she left earlier that evening, but they seemed dirty and disheveled. Her eyes were shut, her expression was flat, and she was bleeding from her head. John also noticed that her right arm appeared distorted. He abruptly rose from his chair, screamed, "Emily!" and the apparition disappeared. But here's the thing, Emily wasn't dead. John later learned that Emily had indeed been in a car accident around the time he had seen her apparition. Fortunately, the accident was not fatal, but Emily had experienced some cuts on her head and a broken arm, which apparently explained the distorted appearance of her right arm. So why did John see an apparition of his wife who was very much alive? It's widely believed that haunt-type phenomena can be categorized as involving either intelligent entities that seem to be aware and responsive, or residual hauntings that are sort of an echo of events from a time long past. These residual hauntings appear like holograms, replaying a moment in time that has somehow been captured in the ether to be replayed under some unknown conditions. In fact, this idea has come to be known by many as the stone tape theory, suggesting that these residual echoes are somehow captured in the very stones of the buildings around us and the earth beneath us. The stone tape theory has evolved from a collection of ideas that date back to the 19th century. In 1837, Charles Babbage, a British mathematician and inventor, published a work called the Ninth Bridgewater Treatise, in which he posited that spoken words leave permanent impressions in the air that over time fade. In 1842, Joseph Rhodes Buchanan coined the term psychometry to refer to the idea that physical objects contain a sort of historical memory that might be read if we were able to develop a means to interpret their emanations. Over the years, the term psychometry has commonly been associated with the practice of mediums who claim that touching of physical objects enables them to gain information about a person or place associated with the object. These ideas led to what is known as place memory, or the belief that apparitions might somehow be attached to buildings and other locations as a sort of recorded memory. This idea gained momentum around 1940 when H. Price, at the time president of the Society for Psychical Research, speculated about the existence of what he called the psychic ether. Price suggested that the psychic ether was a sort of liminal space between the physical and spiritual realms that allowed physical objects to carry traces of earlier experiences and emotions. This notion was further advanced in the early 1960s by T.C. Lethbridge. Lethbridge, a former archaeologist who had turned his attention toward the paranormal, suggested that energy fields enabled physical objects to hold records of past events. This hypothesis, which Lethbridge published in his 1961 book Ghosts and GHOUL, is believed by many to be the inspiration behind a 1972 BBC film called The Stone Tape. The film follows a team of scientists who, while renovating an old building, encounter an apparition of a woman that seems to replay the events surrounding her untimely death. The scientists in the film speculate that the apparition they have encountered is actually a sort of recording of events that had been etched in the stones of the building, much in the same way that data can be stored on magnetic tapes. Not only would this film introduce the ideas of place memory to a wider audience, but it also gave this idea a name that has stuck with it to this day, the stone tape theory. In the decades that follow the film, the stone tape theory has grown in popularity, and it has often been posited as an explanation for residual hauntings. Those who adhere to the idea suggest that traumatic or emotionally charged events of the past, captured in the stones that surround us, are somehow played back in the right conditions, or for those who possess the requisite sensitivity to experience them. The stone tape theory has drawn criticism for its lack of empirical evidence, and for its use of the term theory as an attempt to frame pseudoscientific claims as legitimate science. And in all fairness, the stone tape theory should more accurately be described as the stone tape hypothesis, as it does lack the empirical testing necessary to be called a theory, at least in the scientific community. Despite these critiques, the general idea behind the stone tape theory merits exploration. There remain widespread accounts of haunt-type phenomena that seem to play out like echoes from the past. And while those echoes may or may not actually be written in the stones as such, the idea that some form of residual energy exists and it is experienced as apparitions seems quite plausible. To suggest that such a phenomenon does not exist or could not exist, simply because science does not yet understand the mechanisms thereof, would be hubris of the highest order. But how does this relate to the account of John and Emily? Well, a possible explanation for Emily's living apparition might be found within the ideas associated with the stone tape theory. What is relevant in this case is the means by which those echoes come to be recorded in the first place. Regardless of whether the echoes are recorded in stones, trees, the psychic ether, or something else, it is believed that the actual mechanism for those recordings involves sudden bursts of emotional energy, the kind that is often associated with traumatic deaths, or in Emily's case, in an automobile accident. Could it be that Emily's accident triggered the kind of emotional energy that also results in residual hauntings? Could it be that there is some mechanism, yet unknown by science, for capturing, recording, and replaying echoes of emotionally charged traumatic experiences? We don't know the answers, but if we ask the right questions, someday we will.